unique Georgia attraction that stood for nearly 4 decades is destroyed.
Popular North Georgia monument that's been the source of a lot of speculation over 4 decades.
The quiet town of Elberton in rural Georgia was awakened by a deafening explosion in the early hours of July 6th. The iconic Georgia Guidestones, known as America's Stonehenge, were severely damaged in the blast, leaving authorities scrambling to identify the culprit. The air was still thick with the smell of explosives when they cleared the site of the Georgia Guidestones, less than 12 hours after an IED detonated and tore through the monument. It was a move that defied all rational thought. Instead of preserving the area for a thorough forensic investigation, they bulldozed it all in the name of safety. But why? What were they trying to hide? And if the bomb maker left any clues behind, they were now buried deep within the rubble. This is where the story truly begins, a tale of secrecy, conspiracy, and the mysterious Georgia Guidestones. If you've never heard of them before, get ready to be plunged into a world of intrigue and horror. The year was 1979, when a mysterious man using a pseudonym, Robert C. Christian, approached the Elberton Granite Finishing Company on behalf of a small group of patriotic Americans who believed in God to commission a peculiar structure. Christian had big plans for the stones, wanting them to serve as a compass, calendar, and clock that could survive even the worst disasters. He chose the pseudonym Christian as a nod to his religious beliefs. His inspiration came from Stonehenge, a Neolithic monument in England, which he found impressive but lacking a message. Joe Fendley, a skeptical executive at Elberton Granite, tried to dissuade Christian by providing him with a sky-high price quote. To Fendley's surprise, Christian agreed to the price without hesitation, claiming to represent an anonymous group that had been planning the project for 2 decades. The secretive group's reason for choosing Elbert County included its abundant local granite, rural surroundings, mild climate, and family connections to the area. The Guidestones' total cost was never disclosed, but it exceeded $100,000, equivalent to $400,000 in today's money. The 6 towering granite slabs rose almost 20 feet into the air, an imposing sight that served not just as a sundial, but also as an astronomical calendar. Words were etched deeply into their surfaces, carved in a dozen different languages, including English and Babylonian cuneiform. Some saw the messages as profound, with commandment-like inscriptions instructing humanity to maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. But for others, the stones were just a quirky roadside attraction, a curiosity that drew thousands of visitors each year to the quiet town of Elberton, self-proclaimed as the granite capital of the world. And for the most paranoid among us, the Guidestones became the focal point of a sinister conspiracy theory involving a secretive group of puppet masters who pull the strings of the world. For years, the Georgia Guidestones had been a source of intrigue and argument. In 2008 and 2014, they were defaced with ominous messages referencing the New World Order, a far-fetched conspiracy theory that posits a cabal of elites controlling the world's populace. But the stones also grabbed headlines last year before its destruction, when a Republican candidate running for governor pledged to destroy the satanic monument. Although Candace Taylor's campaign ultimately went nowhere, her declaration caught the attention of politicians who share her sinister views. In an interview with conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, Marjorie Taylor Greene, a congresswoman from Georgia, claimed the Guidestones called for population control, which she linked to the hard left. After news of the stones' demolition surfaced, Taylor tweeted that God had brought down the satanic Guidestones. It is unclear whether the bomber of the Guidestones bought into such fantasies, but it is troubling that politicians increasingly seem to. Beliefs in different conspiracy theories tend to go hand in hand, says Kelly Garrett, a professor of communications at Ohio State University. However, the mystery surrounding the Guidestones runs deeper than just who financed them. Erected in the middle of nowhere in Georgia, nobody knows for sure who put up the funds to build this massive structure. However, some suspect that media mogul Ted Turner may have been involved, given that he grew up in the area. While some argue that the stones are benign and meant to guide humanity in the event of a global catastrophe, the secrecy around their construction suggests otherwise. Any plan for all humanity that's shrouded in secrecy is unlikely to be for the greater good. Now, speaking of secrets, let me tell you about something that's been buried for decades beneath the Guidestones monument. A time capsule. While we don't know if it will ever be exhumed, I believe it should be. Who knows what kind of information or clues it might contain? It could be the key to unlocking the mystery of who financed the construction of this enigmatic structure. Many refer to the Guidestones as a monument for the New World Order or for globalism, and it's hard not to see why. The messages etched into the granite slabs seem to promote a one-world government, Marxism, eugenics, and even a mass depopulation of the planet. The call to maintain the population under 500 million may seem harmless to some when viewed in the context of a post-cataclysmic world. But with the current population nearing 8 billion, it would mean the loss of almost 94% of the people on the planet today. Now hold up a minute. Let's take a step back and really think about it. A monument with instructions to maintain humanity under 500 million people. That's like saying we should sacrifice 15 out of 16 people on this planet just to make sure nature is in balance. Who came up with these guidelines? And more importantly, who are they to decide who should live or die? And don't even get me started about the eugenics part, guiding reproduction wisely? That's just a fancy way of saying certain people shouldn't be allowed to have kids, which is a huge violation of human rights. And who's to say who should be allowed to reproduce and who shouldn't? That is no one's right but their own. However, there are some who argue that depopulation is necessary to save the planet. But such a drastic reduction in the human population raises ethical questions and is simply not acceptable. The Guidestones' messages seem to have been created with a sinister purpose in mind, and their secretive origins only add to the mystery and suspicion surrounding this monument. Another guideline says, unite humanity with a living new language. Now, the idea of a living new language is intriguing, but also a bit concerning. Who gets to decide what this language is and how it's used? Will it be forced upon us, or will it be a choice? And what happens to all the other languages? Are we supposed to abandon them? It's a complex issue with no easy answers. On one hand, a common language could facilitate global communication and understanding. On the other hand, it could also lead to a loss of diversity and culture. The Guidestones' suggestion of a living new language raises important questions about the balance between unity and individuality and how we can navigate those complexities in a rapidly changing world. Now we're getting to the juicy part, the so-called guidelines inscribed on those ominous stones. Number 4 urges us to rule with a tempered reason, and number 5 calls for fair laws and just courts. Great, people could get on board with those. But then we have number 6, which suggests that all nations should rule internally and only resolve external disputes in a world court. Wait, hold on a minute. Are we talking about a world government here? That sounds a bit too much like a slippery slope. And as for number 7, well, who doesn't hate petty laws and useless officials? Number 8 may sound nice at first, but the devil is in the detail. Balancing personal rights with social duties may seem like a good idea for a community, but when it crosses a line, it becomes a form of Marxism. This ideology emphasizes communism, where the governing body controls individuals, leading to terrible outcomes throughout history. From Maoists in China to the Soviets in Russia, the Pol Pot regime in Cambodia, and even the atrocities committed by Hitler, this type of governing is disastrous. However, the last guideline seems more agreeable, encouraging people to prize truth, beauty, and love, and seek harmony with the infinite. But what's the point of these guidelines? Are they simply harmless musings, or are they a roadmap for something more sinister? One thing's for sure, those stones are hiding more than just a time capsule. The world is a complex place, and there are always multiple ways of looking at any issue. Take the idea of leaving room for nature, for example. On the one hand, it seems obvious that we shouldn't destroy our planet with our excessive consumption and waste. But on the other hand, some people take things to extremes, suggesting that the only way to save the planet is to drastically reduce the human population. While this may seem like a radical solution, it's not hard to see why some people might think it's necessary. After all, we're facing crises on multiple fronts, from climate change to global famine to political unrest. But what's really scary is that some of these problems are being deliberately caused by people who want to maintain power and control over others. That's why it's so important to stay informed and aware of what's happening in the world. When something is done in secrecy, it's not a good sign. It's especially concerning when it involves all of humanity. If it was something beneficial and nothing to worry about, why would they hide it? It's time to face the fact that there are plenty of lies out there, and things seem to be getting crazier by the day. That's why we need to demand the truth, and we need it now. What was in that time capsule that they didn't want us to see? It's time to ask questions and demand answers. If there's nothing to hide, then there's no reason to keep it a secret. Let's face it, we're living in a time of uncertainty, and the last thing we need is more secrecy. It's time for the truth to come out, and we need to know who created this site and what their intentions were. We can't afford to be complacent and blindly accept whatever they tell us. We need to stay vigilant and demand transparency. Remember, the truth shall set us free. Now let's hear your thoughts in the comments below.